You are listening to the Wildlife Photography Podcast with Rob Reed and Josh Galicki, bringing together the love of nature and photography. Episode 42. We look back on 2025 and look forward to 2026. Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to the Wildlife Photography Podcast with me, Rob Reed, and my co-host, Josh Galicki. Hey, Josh, how's it going? How is 2025 and the Christmas break?
Hey, the break's been great, Rob, and it's going well. Looking forward to 2026. We'll talk a little bit more about 2025, but, we've done similar shows in the past, with year-end reviews, and I have to say, I am looking forward to closing out 2025. I think a lot of people are, and I can't wait for 2026. It's good to have 2025 in the rearview mirror.
Yeah, for me, I mean, from a personal point of view, I've had a load of stuff going on, and that it's not been the best year. And I know I know you've had a load of stuff going on in your personal life as well, which hasn't made it the best year. But yeah, so I'm a bit with you. I'm kind of glad to see the back of it. However, it doesn't mean to say that there haven't been some amazing trips and experiences along the way, and some pretty good pictures as well at times. So I'm going to try and remember 2025, I think, in those terms rather than for all the other stuff that's been going on. But yeah,
same here. Photography can be an antidote to some of the things that we encounter in our personal, professional lives, and it's a good escape. So yeah, I think that's a good way of framing it, Rob. I think that's
actually,
as well.
Yeah, 2025 is probably the perfect example of how photography and nature can, be that antidote to all those things, all those problems and things that go on in your personal life. And it's certainly something that I've, reached out for a lot this year, to de-stress and to get away from all the other things that have been going on. So, yeah, it's reiterated just how important it is to me, I think, this year, being able to get out and just spend time in nature and, just focus on what's in front of my lens rather than everything else that's sort of going on and behind the scenes. So yeah, I think 2025 has been a really good year to emphasize that. I think the same for you.
Yeah, I mean, in my professional career, I started the year thinking, okay, well, I have no idea what's going to happen. It can't be all that bad. Oh wow, 2025, Rob, exceeded my expectations in that department. But it was a good news story at the end. I was able to transition to a new job and move out of my old position, which I was in for many, many years. And I don't want to sound too political, but, with the current administration that came in this past year, they weren't a huge fan of my agency, and things were turning upside down pretty quickly. So I decided to stick it out. And then I realized, all right, now is a good time to move on. And that's great. I mean, these are things that are completely out of your control, and you have to, be a bit Taoist about it, I guess, or, just roll with the flow and take the punches, and you can't control it, and just, freedom within the storm, I guess. Right.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's worrying about the things you can control and not the things you can't, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, it's easier said than done, but, yeah, keeping as much destiny as you can in your own hands. I've always been a fan of that.
Yeah. And I can control going into nature, right? And putting myself and immersing myself into nature, having my camera. So thank goodness for that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's been a real outlet for me this year. So, and, I'm thankful for it. We're in a position where we can do that. And I guess, we should be grateful for that, because there are people out there that aren't in the same position. So
Absolutely. And one thing about photography too, I mean, I think you would agree on this, is just the gratitude for nature, gratitude for being able to go out there, experience these things. And it makes photography that much more enjoyable. We talked about this a little bit in some of the previous podcasts. When you're out there and you're pushing yourself and you're just trying to force an image, it's not as enjoyable. When you're out there appreciating things and just, having that sense of gratitude, I think you enjoy it a lot more.
Yeah.
And I think we both do.
Yeah, and sometimes just dropping that camera away from your eye and just spending the time to appreciate what's happening around you.
Yeah.
I think well, not only do you not miss the moment like that, I think it can actually improve your photography anyway, because you start seeing things you hadn't before if you're sort of so myopically focused on one thing. I mean, I guess for me, seminal moment this year, and which I've talked about not only on this podcast but on others, was Snettisham. I mean, that
Mhm.
that was I guess a real turning point for me in the year, where that moment when that flock of birds just lifts, from these mud flats, and you've got thousands of them.
Mm.
It just said makes the hair stand up on the back of your neck, and then you just really appreciate how majestic and wonderful nature can be at times, and how privileged you feel at being able to experience those things. I'll never forget that, and I just, I guess that's probably my top moment of the year.
Mm.
Would be that moment those birds lifted, because I mean everything was just so perfect. The weather just couldn't have been any better, and and being amongst other people, there were quite a few people there, which isn't normally my thing. I like to be alone, or with a tight group of people, but there were hundreds of people on that beach. But when you just know that every person on that beach was feeling the same way I was when that moment happened. So you're
Mm.
kind of sharing this this joyous thing, this most amazing experience with people that totally get it. And I think that added to it rather than took away, like it normally does when you've got so many people around.
Yeah.
I think that for me was an incredible moment. Probably not one of my photographic highlights, because I never really got an image, I don't think, that did that whole thing justice, because you can't factor in all those other senses and all the other ways you're feeling at the time into a still photograph. It's just so difficult.
Yeah.
So I think, I mean, it's not a disappointment, but I don't think I managed to convey the moment and do it complete justice in the pictures that I took. But I'm not worried about that.
Yeah, I feel the same thing, Rob. So many times over the years where I've been around some of these great aggregations of animals, whether it's birds or whether it's mammals migrating in Africa and what have you. But there's so much more there. It's auditory. It's it's physical being there. It's obviously visual. All these things, and it's very, very difficult. I've never been able to capture those moments or come away with an image that does the totality of that experience justice. It's very, very difficult. Snow
You,
geese launching, all that stuff that
yeah,
I've been around.
you can't incorporate that sort of what I call the peripheral vision with it, can you?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's in that sort of still photograph. You can't do that. So you've got all these other sensations which are being hit at the same time, as you said. The sound, the smells, just the general buzz and the atmosphere.
Yeah.
Is so difficult to convey in a still photograph, because you're just not reaching those senses with people, because it's visual.
Even
So,
the wing beats sometimes, when you get these major liftoffs in the Eastern Shore right now, we have, just millions of Canada geese. A lot of them come down. Some of them are more local, but they're just everywhere in my backyard. In the cove, I probably had a couple thousand the other day. And when you see them come in, it's like a cloud, and you could feel their wing beats flying over. It's just, there's so much more, to your point, beyond the visual sense of the experience, that it's very hard to take a photograph and convey that.
Yeah, I mean, it's like diving gannets, isn't it, on Shetland, when you're on the boat, and you can't explain to people that these gannets are basically brushing you with their wings as they're going.
Their wings were hitting my face.
Yeah. And they're
very,
splashing,
very
getting wet
tactile.
because they're splashing you when they go in. And you can't convey that with a photograph. It's so difficult. I mean, you could probably get there to a degree with video, but
that's what I was just thinking. Maybe video is the more adequate medium for that.
But then I think video takes away as well, because you've got so much going on, you can't concentrate on one specific moment, which is why I love stills photography so much. It's because you're capturing that one moment in time, and there's nothing else to distract you other than looking at that still image. But
and stills can be, certainly, as we know, less literal, right? Video is much more literal to me than stills are.
Yeah. So what's your sort of favorite highlight, do you think, from 2025?
I was thinking about this before the podcast. I think there's three, really, and it's seasonal. In the wintertime, last January, the bay, most or a good amount of the bay, the Chesapeake Bay, that is the region that I live in, certain parts of it just froze over. And I was out with a fellow podcast listener, Scott Warner, really great guy, good photographer, and we shoot a lot now. We were out down in Virginia along the Chesapeake Bay, and we're in this salt marsh, and everything was frozen, all the guts and everything.
How often does that happen now? Can't happen that much.
Not often. Since I've been living down there, and this is a 4-year stretch, this is probably maybe the second time I saw something like this. And we came across a bunch of clapper rails, which are, rails or marsh birds. They're very secretive, but everything was snowed over and there was ice.
You don't see them, do they? They're almost hiding away in the undergrowth. Yeah,
exactly. And they were coming out to try to feed or get whatever they could on the ice. So they were just wide open, just kind of like almost, sliding and skirting along the ice and foraging for what have you. I don't know. There were some openings of water that I think they were trying to get fish and some, aquatic, some sort of aquatic life to forage and feed on, but it was wild to see them out in the open. And we had some really cool images of them, and they're warmer birds. They're tawny, kind of tan birds. They're pretty drab in color, but at that day they contrasted so well with, everything was cool blues and ice, and we had a great time. We were looking for owls, and we came across that.
It's so important when you get a situation like that where you can use that contrast.
Oh,
it's amazing how it lifts things. Yeah.
And when you have all blues and ice, and it sets a minimal scene too. So we played around with stuff loose in the frame, tight. So that was great. That was a really good experience. And then in the summer, there was a green heron family that nested not far from my property. And the young ones and the parent, I spent, I kayak most evenings in the summer, and I'll bring my camera out. And I spent a lot of time getting different images of these green herons, behavioral shots, high key, low key, environmental portraits, flight shots. So that was kind of my little kind of experiment, just focusing on them and just different compositions and behaviors. As a matter of fact, I put together a portfolio just recently of these green herons. So that was a nice little project I had in the summer. And then in the fall, I was out shooting, or I was going to shoot. I went to this spot. It's a very famous, expansive salt marsh, and looking for just maybe early short-eared owls that have arrived and some things, and raptors. Complete bust. And then I went to a local national wildlife refuge not far from my house, and I got this shot. It was late morning, and there were a lot of photographers there, and they were actually shooting in the other direction. They were completely ignoring the scene. And I'm like, this scene looks special to me. And it was fairly harsh sun, 10:30, 11 o'clock, but it was this expansive tidal flat with these old piers, and there were gulls and terns. And I took some high key images. I pushed my exposure. I still had them as silhouettes because the sun was pretty strong, but I still blew out the whites a little bit. And it created these images that look like sheet music to me. And I just love that.
Yeah, I've seen that image.
And that was a pretty special moment. So I would say that the sheet music moment, the green heron family, and then that the clapper rails out on the ice. Those three really stick out. All local, by the way. I didn't really travel too much outside of the area.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't do a lot of traveling. I mean, where did I go this year? I mean, Wales, obviously. I mean, I go to Wales quite a lot. And I think, I've been to Wales, I think four times this year. South Wales a couple of times, Snowdonia, which is North Wales, once, and then Anglesey again, which is North Wales, once. So I've had some, I mean, I guess really some of the best photographs I've taken this year have come from those trips. I mean, I went to Anglesey in May, and that's a really good place for seabirds. I mean, a lot of people from the UK will know. If I mention South Stack, they will know that location is it's like nesting site for lots of seabirds. And it's on this sort of, there's a nice picturesque lighthouse and all this. So it's got all the bits going for it, dramatic cliffs and all this sort of stuff. But funnily enough, I mean, I think probably some of the best shots I took there were of a pied wagtail. You just come across these things, don't you? It's just, I guess, as I was walking down to the coast from the car park, there it was, just hopping around some benches, and they had this nice green grass I could put in the foreground, then the sea in the background. So I had these greens and blues and this black and white sort of pied bird in there, and it was stretching its wings, and it was all sorts of stuff was going on. So I got some nice shots of that. And then later on that day, I was photographing Chuff as well, because I know it's a good location for them, and because it's quite a dramatic coastline and they can come in quite close, at that location. So that was good. I was getting some nice environmental stuff and some close-ups of them in flight and all that sort of stuff. So light was a bit harsh, but I managed to get some of that sort of that thrift, the sea pink flowers in there and all that sort of thing going on. So that was really nice. I think I had a rock pipit as well one day, which I shot, in some nice light. And then another day on that trip, I went to visit a place there's a tern colony. So I was doing terns into literally shooting them into direct, strong sunlight and things like that, just experimenting with those sorts of things. Managed to get a decent shot of those. Came across things like stone chat and that sort of thing, sort of wandering on. And then another photographer I bumped into there showed me some sand martins, a colony of sand martins further on down the path. So I shot a few frames of those. I mean, nothing earth-shatteringly good, but it was good to see sand martins again and be that close to them and at least have a go at them. So I guess, Anglesey was really good in May. I think probably the most amazing trip to Wales was in the autumn. The autumn color this year has just been so good. So I was messing around with slow shutter and autumn color and running water and those sort of lovely mountain streams with those sort of very I guess graphic boulders and
that's a lot of fun. That's a lot of fun. Yeah.
But putting them in the same frame, so sort of 5-second exposure or something like that, focusing on the stream and then throwing the camera up to autumn foliage and just messing around, see what I could do. And there's
in camera composites you're talking about, Rob?
Yeah. But so it's the sort of thing that people might take 2 exposures and blend them in camera. I was just doing it in one.
Yeah, that's fun.
So that was quite good fun, quite eye-opening as well as to what you can actually do. I was teaching myself a new technique, which was I always like to, what it's like, you always like to try something new. So that was good to experiment with, and actually came away with quite a few nice photographs. Wasn't that great for birds, that trip? But the autumn color was really, really good. I want to go back.
It's interesting you mentioned that, Rob, because when it comes to, I mostly shoot wildlife and I don't get into landscapes too often or just nature scenes. In the fall, I'm always attracted to doing waterfalls with fall color or just different types of woodland shots with autumn colors with trees and so forth. I don't know what it is. Fall is the time where I'm much more attracted just taking landscapes and just natural scenes without wildlife. I was doing covered bridges even this fall.
I saw a few of your shots.
I kind of, I'm out of my element a little bit, but it's fun. It's actually really enjoyable. That's the time of year that I'm for whatever reason just more drawn to doing landscapes.
And I think actually when you do things like that, it helps with other aspects of your photography as well, because you are doing something a little different.
Yeah.
Using different techniques. And I think, I'm always looking at other genres of photography as well, because there's just so much we can learn about how people use light in street photography, for example, or portrait photography, how we can use that in wildlife photography. How people compose landscapes, for example, particularly, someone like you who likes to shoot small in the frame a lot of the time. You must have taken a lot of inspiration from landscape photographers to start putting those scenes together.
Absolutely. And I would say it's probably a lot easier to be a landscape photographer and go into bird photography or wildlife photography than the other way around. Because compositionally, you learn a lot more being a landscape photographer. Even street photography. There's I forgot his name. He's a famous French photographer, but I think he has a Leica and he goes to urban scenes and gets just these amazing black and white images. And sometimes he'll just focus on rock doves or gulls in a park, and these images are stunning.
See, the guy uses shadow a lot, not harsh shadows and things like that.
Alan, he's on Instagram, but he's not a wildlife photographer, and he does mostly city, urban, some grit stuff too. Shoots Leica, but I mean, his images are amazing. So really getting those inspirations can really improve your wildlife photography.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when I started life as a landscape photographer, that was my sort of first draw, and yeah, I get it entirely. It's easier to transition, I think, from there into wildlife photography.
Yeah.
Which is what I've done. So yeah.
The biggest advantage, I think, for some wildlife photographers is they love animals and they've been around animals most of their life, so they have the field craft, right? So they know how to approach birds or mammals and get close or put themselves in positions where they're not stressing the animal out, and they can come up with some pretty pleasing competitions and not just compositions and not just have pepper flakes.
Yeah.
So yeah,
exactly.
yeah. So that's probably the biggest advantage they bring.
Yeah, exactly. And I think the other thing, I mean, autumn was amazing this year because the fungi season was pretty good as well.
Mm.
And I remember I went out with Victoria Hillman and Georgina when she was here. And honestly, we saw the biggest fly agarics I've ever seen in my life. I mean,
Wow.
size of dinner plates, and there was just fungi everywhere. So we had a blast with that. So again, I don't think I came away with images that would knock anybody over, but it's just the experience. I think 2025 for me has been not necessarily about outstanding images, but outstanding experiences or really memorable experiences, and enjoying it with other people as well. Actually, I think that's what 2025 has been for me more than anything else. And I think, those fungi, a couple of fungi shoots that I had, yeah, were really good fun. Not learning anything new particularly, but just, with good friends and just seeing perhaps, some of the most amazing fungi I've seen.
Wow.
Ever. So I said those fly agarics were just enormous. And I thought they were extraordinary, but apparently this year there's been a lot of that sort of stuff around, really big fungi about, and lots of them. So that was pretty much a highlight for me. What else has been going? Oh, and actually the trip I've just come back from literally yesterday. Over Christmas we went to Wales again, but we went to Pembrokeshire, which has the most stunning beaches. I mean, if you think of Cornwall, most people who even if they don't know the UK will have heard of Cornwall and the sort of stunning beaches and rocky coastlines that has. Pembrokeshire is very similar. It's not that far away. It's on the west side of the UK, and I was shooting a lot of what I would call sandscapes, seaweed on the sand, the lovely patterns that it makes sometimes, and shells and barnacles and limpets on rocks and that sort of stuff. But then we had the most amazing light for a few days. It's been really blue skies, frosty in the morning, typical sort of winter, clear, bright, crisp winter weather. And I came across these, what are called sand mason worms, and they construct these tubes which they protect themselves with. So the worm is actually under the sand, but about 2 or 3 centimeters of their tube will stick out above the surface of the sand, and they construct it with, I mean, I guess it's some sort of adhesive glue or whatever that they use, but they stick particles of sand and shells and all this sort of thing together to make this protective tube, and they stick a little bit above the surface of the sand so it stands proud. And when the tide retreats, these things will, you go along the beach and most people won't even see them, but if you look hard enough for them, because they're not that big, they were catching the light in the most amazing way. So you get them backlit. So you remember, those lampshades that are made out of broken pieces of glass.
Yeah.
And you get all the lovely different colors and the way the light, diffracts through them. And the sand particles and the shell particles were doing exactly the same thing. So if you actually backlit them and then put them against some sharp or some harsh sunlight on the wet sand and everything, I was getting all this bokeh, and the sun was coming through the sort of warm particle, because the sand's like, sort of yellows and oranges and things like that, these nice warm tones. And the contrast was amazing. So I just got these, a few shots I'm really, really pleased with, are these weirdly, just bizarre structures. Just doing it with a macro lens. So that was so much fun.
You just obviously shared some of those images with me. It reminds me of sea glass a little bit, Rob.
Yeah, exactly that. Yeah. Exactly that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's wild. I've never seen anything like that before.
And I don't think I've ever seen shots like, I mean, I kind of knew what they were. I had to look up exactly what they were called because somebody stopped me on the beach actually, well, it was day before yesterday. And because of course they saw me photographing something and they said, oh, well, you know, what's caught your interest so much on the beach? Because they couldn't see them. And I said, well, you see these little things just, oh, right. Okay. I said, yeah, well, they're these like these tube worms that construct these things, and they're just, the little, just a little bit stands proud of the sand. And I said, yeah, I've just been photographing them with the sun behind them, and I just like the way they look when you do it like that. And I was showing them on the back of the camera, and they were going, oh my God, wow. It was so good when you can share that knowledge with somebody,
Yeah.
and give somebody an insight and tell them about something they knew nothing about. So yeah, that's always a good experience.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially in the macro world. I mean, there's so many things. You were just talking about fungi. I mean, there's so many things out there that you can get out there and photograph with a macro lens, and it's this whole hidden world. I've got, I haven't done a lot of it. I do it mostly in the summertime with my pollinator garden, and I love to just keep adding plants and expanding it because it brings all these different types of bugs and, insects, butterflies, moths, and it's a whole new world when you're photographing this stuff. And it's often overlooked, obviously, but you can be very creative with it. Compositionally, it can be very difficult, but I think you can be super creative if you have the right eye and you practice with it.
Oh yeah, and it's amazing, isn't it? How just a millimeter or two, just changing this perspective a little bit, changes the whole dynamic of the scene as well. I love that about macro.
Yeah.
Because if you want to start putting in foreground elements and getting those shapes reflected in bokeh balls in the background, for example, literally you can just move a millimeter or two and just change the whole look of the image and the shapes and everything that will appear within it. It's just, which is why I hate using a tripod, because those little movements, it's just so difficult.
So restricting. Yeah,
it is.
If
really
you're photographing something super, super small and it's inanimate and it's not moving, then that helps. I've seen people with tripods. It's like a slide rule almost, where you have the camera on and you can kind of move it.
The focusing rail.
Yeah, that's it. The focusing rail. I've never shot with one, but I've seen photographers use it, and it can be very exacting. And I get it, but good luck doing that with anything that moves.
It's just not me. I mean, I can't be that precise.
Yeah,
and I think that's why I gravitate towards the artistic side of things with photography, because you don't have to be precise with it. If you're documenting something and take macro, for example, and you're doing a focus stack, that in itself requires you to be quite precise.
I agree. And I'm the same way, Rob, because images for me are more of a feeling than they are technical precision, and that feels like technical precision. I've tried it once or twice, and that was it for me. I could never take an insect or something and take 200 shots and stack them and do all of this. And you're a researcher or a scientist, in my opinion, at that point. Interesting. My opinion. And people do it amazingly. It's just not my style.
Yeah, interesting you should say that, because I did a talk recently to a camera club about, I think, the 3 stages you can go through as a photographer. And obviously the first one is that sort of literal representation of things where you are precise and it's all about capturing detail and about what you saw. So I think that first stage is, the literal, this is what I saw. The next stage is moving into something a little bit more artistic, which is trying to explain how you felt at the time. And then there's the last bit, which I call experimental seeing, where you just, anything's possible. It can be completely abstract and there are no rules. And I think that's a place where very few people get to, actually, but that's a place I feel that I'm going with my own photography now. So I don't mind if I take a frame deliberately where nothing is in focus at all. And I've done that this year, just to create a completely abstract photograph, or something where you're moving the camera to such a degree that there's nothing for you to really focus on. There's nothing for your brain to latch onto. You're just creating textures and patterns, but something which actually is quite pleasing. Those are sorts of things that I like to try and experiment with now.
Yeah.
So yeah,
And I think a lot of
it's
people
yeah,
who do that, or even, folks who appreciate that type of photography, it's an attraction, I think, to shape and color, right? I think
yeah,
different types of color patterns, complementary colors, shapes, lines, all these things, right? And if you can emphasize that and bring that out, I think, a lot of people appreciate that. And a lot of photographers, I think, who get to that stage, they have an appreciation for those types of elements.
yeah. And it's I think it's quite eye opening for a lot of people when you sort of describe the process that you go through to get to these places in your own photography. I mean, camera clubs are particularly good examples of that, where most people, when they enter a camera club competition, they're always told that everything's got to be sharp, everything's got to be technically perfect, the exposure's got to be this, blah blah blah, and you're ripping that rule book up for them and saying, no, 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 it's absolutely fine for you to do whatever you want to do. Don't be constrained by the rules that you think you've been given.
It's
And yeah, it's interesting to see people's reactions to it.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that. I just over the past couple of months judged maybe 4 camera clubs, one in New England, a couple down in Florida, and I didn't know what to expect. There were some really good images in the clubs, and I would say 5 to 10% were very, in my opinion, very artistic. Some really kind of bordered on the abstract. So I was pleasantly surprised, right? And these are, local camera clubs. Most of the photographers were, I guess, shooting in those local areas. But there were some just great images in there, and some very artistic images. So I was pleasantly surprised when I
Yeah.
was judging some of these images. So it's good. I feel like that type of photography it's spreading out a little more.
It's funny you should touch on local stuff because I think, I was saying about I'm not sure I took my best images in some of the situations which I've been describing. But I know that my best images this year have come from local stuff,
Yeah.
places that I've been to hundreds and hundreds of times, because I always find a different way to photograph something, always. And that to me I think it's part of the fun. I love that sort of challenge to know that you photographed a mute swan or a mallard or a little grebe or whatever it might be. You photographed them hundreds and hundreds of times, but to come away from a shoot with a different image, something or a style that you've never shot before, or a situation you've never come across before, and come away with a unique image is always really pleasing to me.
Yep.
Because it's just that sense of achievement. And I think that, yeah, that my best images literally have been of very common stuff this year.
Hmm.
What the images that have pleased me, and that's what it's all about. I think at the end of the day, is producing something that you're proud of and it pleases you rather than pleases everybody else.
Yeah, I feel the same way. I mean, most of my images that I feel are my best images, and each year as I shoot, I feel like I'm harder and harder on myself. So
I think
I'm
you should be as well,
yeah.
actually. Yeah,
Yeah, I think it leads to growth, but I'm much tougher on myself. But I can say objectively, most of my best images are with local common birds. I mean, great blue herons, for example, osprey, and these birds that are very conspicuous. They're out there, but I don't get bored of it, right? Because it's more for me. It's about shooting a beautiful scene than it is trying to turn this great blue heron into an American bittern or some sort of other rare bird. It's not
it's
as
about the
important.
art rather than the subject.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I completely agree. I mean, that's where my own photography has been going for quite a while now. Yeah, so it's just for me the most pleasing stuff has been local things, and yeah, mute swans. I mean, you can't get away from them. They're just such an elegant subject. They're I don't know, they're kind of the supermodels, aren't they, of the bird world almost. They're in that category. Very distinctive, beautiful looking birds.
Yeah.
Sort of thing that, I mean, you can put kingfishers and stuff like that in there with those amazing colors and the nice proportions and all this sort of stuff. But there's something about a swan, I just think that lends itself to so many different approaches and this sort of artistic, this artistic bent towards them. Right?
It's an elegant bird. I mean, there are some birds that are just more elegant than others, frankly. I mean, that's an elegant bird.
Yeah.
Herons are elegant. Swans are elegant. Egrets are elegant. I wouldn't call an owl elegant. Maybe the way they fly, certain shorebirds, are they elegant? I don't know. Or you would say waders, I guess, but
Yeah. I
it's
mean,
just some birds are more elegant
something
than
like
others.
that is an elegant looking bird, isn't
Yeah.
it?
You have
But
the slope, the kind of that sweep of the bill, and
yeah,
yeah, I
yeah.
agree.
But you're not calling a dunlin elegant, are you? You know, it's a dumpy, lovely. I mean, it's a lovely bird, but it's not an elegant bird. A spoonbill, elegant bird, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Funny story. I think I maybe told you this. I was this place called Bombay Hook, which is a big wildlife refuge in Delaware. It's not far from me, and we were there looking for avocets one time, I think, and there was this guy said, "Hey, are there any avocets?" And he was not a birder, and he goes, "Nah, just a bunch of goddamn dumbling all over the place over." So he called them dumbling. I think it was maybe a Freudian slip from his perspective, but yeah, he wasn't too interested in the
Oh,
elegance
poor
of
little
dumbling.
dunlin. I feel like I've done them a disservice now.
I agree. I think they're pretty birds. There's some of the shorebirds we have, in the colder months too. They don't migrate. I believe they do in North America. They don't migrate further south. Like where I'm at, you could see them and yellow legs all around the bay, even in the wintertime. So it's fun to see them because they're one of the only shorebirds around.
Yeah, and actually, do you know, talking about yellowlegs reminded me of gulls, actually.
Yeah,
And they're another bird that is so underrated.
I agree.
Because, you know, but let's not talk about specific species, but common
Yeah,
in lots of places and overlooked. And I think it's such a shame. I mean, I've got some great images of gulls this year, doing some slow shutter stuff, which again I've really enjoyed, continuing that particular journey with the slow shutter things, but layering in other techniques with it, like there might be some high key or some low key, or other bits and pieces in the mix
yeah.
with that sort of slow shutter, be it panning or ICM or whatever it is.
And they've
Uh,
got the right color too, because
yeah.
most of them or a lot of them can be snow white, but yet you have like real rich color in the bill, the orbital rings. There's color where it counts. And when the bird's that white and that bright, I think you can really play around with them, especially from an artistic
Oh
standpoint.
God, yeah,
They've
yeah,
got the right palette.
yeah. Because you can use that contrast if you've got a dark background, or you
Yeah.
can make them blend into the background if you've got a high key situation, and create some really abstract stuff. So they're a hell of a lot of fun.
Yeah,
And this is
absolutely.
going back to what we're saying about producing art rather than producing a species list.
That's right. That's right.
You know?
Absolutely. And for people buying prints or buying or appreciating art, it's a completely recognizable bird. I mean, just people just associate, they see the silhouette of a gull, they know exactly what it is. Well, it's a seagull, but to them, I guess, to most people, but it's a recognizable and it's a distinguished shape. So you have
Do you
to
know?
take advantage of that.
I think that's why common subjects work really well with these type of experimental approaches, because people still recognize the species. Whereas if you're doing it with something rarer that people didn't necessarily recognize, even if you had a literal image of them, they wouldn't be able to tell what it was.
Yeah.
I think this is why the common species, like the instantly recognizable things, the mute swans, the gulls, the herons, that's why they make such good subjects for this sort of experimental approach.
Yeah, I agree. And they're easy to get to and they're confiding more often than not, I guess.
And
So
people
yeah, I
relate to them.
agree.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because they come across them all the time. Yeah. No.
I'm thinking about some of these images that I've shot over 2025, Rob. And I'm thinking about, did I do anything from a gear perspective, or has anything changed in 2025 from a gear perspective? For me, absolutely nothing. In some of the past couple of years, I would talk about, oh, well, this camera came out or this lens came out and it changed the game. It's been a long time, in my opinion. And maybe it's because just the technology isn't there yet, or it's just iterating really slowly. But it hasn't really been since 2020, in my opinion, that the markers really moved on camera
Yeah.
bodies, on lenses. I haven't upgraded my gear in some time. I mean, it's been even the two camera bodies I have. I have an R3, which I've been shooting for, 3 or 4 years now, I think, maybe longer than that. I can't remember when it came out. And I have an R5 that I bought in 2020. And I'm just, the R1 came out because I'm a Canon shooter. Of course, I was looking at that. It just wasn't worth the upgrade. And even the R5 II, I'll get it maybe eventually. There's not been, in my opinion, a lot on the tech front that's really forced me to open my wallet up and change upgrade my gear. It's pretty stagnant. Maybe that's a good thing. I don't like, who likes to drop thousands and thousands of dollars every year on upgrading things for, maybe 1 or 2 frames or a few more megapixels or
Yeah,
a stop or
exactly.
2 in ISO performance. Is it worth it? Yeah, probably
And
not.
I think that's a very important point. I mean, it's if you shoot, it depends on how how you shoot and what you're looking to, the output you're looking for. For me, there is no point, as I've said before, in spending thousands and thousands of pounds, dollars, whatever currency you want to put it in, into the fastest glass,
Yep.
and these fixed focal lengths, because they just don't suit my style of shooting. They
Especially if
suit
you're
other,
shooting artistically,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
Or
they suit other people. That's fine.
yeah.
I want that 180 to 600 with a really short throw that it's got. That is, that was a game changer for me. I didn't realize with the 200 to 500 I had before the Nikon f5.6 how long that throw was between those focal lengths, and how difficult that made photography and changing your perspective on something that was happening really quickly.
Yeah.
That 180 to 600, that throw is a game changer for me, an
Mm.
absolute game changer, because I can go from wide to tight really quickly without any effort whatsoever. So that's been really good. And I think from my point of view, 2025, just trying to think when I actually did, it must have been this year that I swapped a load of stuff or bought some new lenses, but I got rid of all the f-mount stuff that I had, the Nikon f-mount stuff, and bought the 105 macro, the Z mount, and I bought the 24 to 120, which is another phenomenal lens.
Mm.
The f4, I love that lens.
I mean, between that lens and the 180 to 600, I mean, you've got
what more do you need?
And that'll serve you for so many years, Rob. I mean, you could be, at that point, you can be 10 generations behind, especially if you're taking, like I like to take, and you do as well, environmental portraits, right? Now, if you want to photograph long-eared owls hunting at, in the dark or in the blue hour, then sure, you need fast glass and maybe you need the latest gear for ISO performance. But outside of these behavioral low light situations, you don't, these types of gear decisions that we're making, they'll last us years and years and years before we'll ever need to upgrade.
Exactly. And actually, if you carry one camera body, which I do, and just the Z9, which does, I don't think I've ever been in a situation before where one camera body pretty much does everything that I want it to do.
Hmm.
The only downside with the Z9 is obviously you've got the inbuilt battery pack under, which makes it if you want to shoot landscape and you want to be on the ground, you can't get it lower. I mean, those sandworms, for example, that was a good example of that. I wanted to be a couple of inches lower and I couldn't get the camera lower.
I guess you'd have to go vertical, but then you're changing, you're cutting off your edges if you really want.
Yeah. But you're cutting down the amount of pixels you can play with, because obviously you've got to shoot it vertical, or you turn the camera completely upside down, but then you put in the hot shoe into the sand and the salt and everything else.
You got to bring a shovel, Rob. You got to dig. You got to dig yourself a hole, climb into it, and then
exactly. So but apart from that, I don't think I've ever had a camera body which will do pretty much everything that I ever wanted in one camera. So there is no need for me to look anywhere else than the Z9 for the time being, until somebody comes up with 50 frames a second in RAW and whatever, whatever.
What is the?
To be honest, my hard drive couldn't take. I don't think.
What's the frames per second on the Z9? Is it
20?
It's 20. And what about the Z8? Is that 20 also?
I think it's 20. Yeah.
Is it 20 also?
Yeah.
I know that a lot of people are buying the Z8 too.
Yeah.
And I'm guessing that's maybe more lightweight.
It hasn't got the built-in grip.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's the Z9 minus the built-in grip, really. So
okay.
Yeah. I can't remember what the other differences are, but yeah, that's a really good camera. I almost bought one of those as opposed to the Z9, but yeah, I plumbed for the Z9 in the end, simply because of all the other bits and pieces that at the time came with it. But
and that came out first, didn't it? I think the Z9 was out before the Z8, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, way before. So so all I'm shooting, I've got the Z9, I've got the 180 to 600, I've got the macro 105 and the 24 to 120, and that makes my bag really light in compared to how it used to be years ago.
Yeah.
And it gives me more options than I need. But quite often I'm going out with just one lens and just concentrating on, today I'm going to shoot macro. Because I don't know about you, but
it forces you to really be in that space, and mixing it up,
exactly,
I agree, is important. That's what I'll do on
exactly.
the kayak. Yeah. I
Yeah,
bring one
if you
lens.
give yourself too many choices, then sometimes I get myself a little confused.
Yeah, and it's instinct for a lot of people to reach for the longest lens, and by just
Yeah.
taking out that one lens, preferably at times a wider angle lens, it forces you to be more creative. I mean, I've gotten some of my favorite shots with I've got an old Canon 200 f2 that I bought used some years ago, and this thing came out 20 some years ago, and it's an amazing lens. It's slow, it can't really shoot, even though if I'm shooting with something that's 20 frames a second like my R5, it's not going to shoot 20 frames a second. It's slower, but that's okay, because it's all about using that lens to create something that I don't need a fast shutter, but it just resolves amazingly.
Well, I mean, if you're shooting fast shutter, you're shooting action, and you don't want that lens anyway.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Yeah.
And it has a softness about it, but in a pleasing way. A lot of portrait photographers used that lens years ago, and some probably still do. I think Canon released on the RF probably a new version of it, or it's coming out, but it has a softness to it that's just so pleasing. It's hard to, certain lenses just have character, right? It's
Yeah, they do.
character.
Yeah, they absolutely do. I remember the F mount 70 to 200 2.8 Nikon, that had a character to it. Yeah, definitely. It had a nice softness to it. It was a great portrait lens.
Mm-hmm.
You're photographing people and you wanted all that lovely fall off, put it at 200, going close, and oh man, that was really good.
And it works great for birds too, especially if you're close to great blue herons or swans or anything like that. You can get some of those same features, but of course with birds. So it's pretty appealing, I think.
Yeah. So I guess 25 really has just been a year of simplification, I think, as far as gear is concerned for me, and I don't see that changing. Actually, I quite like being not restricted is not the right word, but having my focus in on certain areas, certain lenses, certain styles. There'll come a time when I'll want to go out and buy a probe lens or something like that, for example, because I want to try something different and I want a different perspective on stuff. And I've seen some of the shots that people are taking with that sort of thing, and you go, oh, that'd be fun to experiment with. But for now, I'm kind of happy with what I've got and the experiments that I'm currently undertaking. So yeah, I mean, it's not going to stay that way forever. Nothing ever does. Photography is a journey, isn't it? And you're always changing things and moving on. But for the time being, that's my base. That's my base set of kit, and I just don't see it changing. I mean, I don't use flashes often, if ever now. Maybe a light cube or two occasionally.
I use flash less than I did as well years ago. Although the most I use flash now, it's in the macro realm. So if I'm shooting in the pollinator garden or I'm out shooting bugs or insects, I like to use artificial light, but I like it off camera. So, or I don't like it on the hot shoe or even above the hot shoe. I want it on a different axis. So coming in from the side with, I've got like a Westcott diffuser, and I use that Godox I was talking about when we were talking with Gary. So I'll use that off camera, and you can create some pretty cool scenes. And if you're doing herps or reptiles and stuff like that,
or you can create bokeh by putting it directly behind, or
or side light, and get some really dramatic. And that's where I'm using it most, actually, is in the macro, or just shooting the small things with my macro.
So you've gone away from the sort of traditional diffused light to make sure you pick out every detail on the subject, and you're now using it for dramatic
absolutely,
rather than illustrative purposes.
It's always better, in my opinion, more aesthetically pleasing when it's angled. If your flash is coming on the it's just above it's in your hot shoe or just above on the same axis, it's flat. It creates a flat scene. When you're shooting from an angle, you create drama, you've got shadow, but also you're creating contrast and dimension. There's depth to it too. So
you're creating this mood we were talking about in that sort of second phase of creativity, if you like.
Yeah. There was a flash guide. I'm trying to think. There was a guy years ago. Well, he's still shooting. He's based out of Central America. He's an American expat in Costa Rica. What's his name? He had a guide on flash, or he's done videos, Greg Basco, his name is, Rob. He's
Oh yeah,
excellent.
yeah. I know.
He's
Yeah,
done a lot of YouTube and tutorials and whatnot on how to use flash, especially off camera. But for people who are listening, if you want to get some good tips on that, he's pretty good.
yeah. I mean, like everything, if you want to explore flash, then the best place to start is with the standard stuff. You know, you've got to start
Yeah.
from a base, so understand how it works in a traditional sense before you start experimenting. I mean, it goes back to this sort of learn the rules like a pro and break them like an artist quote
Yeah.
from Picasso, I think it was. So yeah, so yeah, you need to know how it works before you can start adding it in more creative ways. But I think the reason I've stepped away from using flash too much is again, it's like the tripod thing. I
More weight,
almost
more
find it
camera.
too restrictive, and
Yeah.
I just like to keep it simple, and the more I've simplified things, I think the more my photography's come along. I mean, I will use flash, don't get me wrong, but very, very rarely. I was trying to think actually, talking about the tripod thing. Out of all the images I used in this last presentation I did to a camera club, how many were taken with a tripod? And I think it was one out of maybe 35 or 40 pictures I showed them.
Mm.
And that was only because I was pre-focusing on a spot, trying to get a bird in flight silhouette, with backlit. And there was no way that I was going to autofocus with the underexposure that I had. So I was just trying to make sure I captured it flying through the correct plane and just take as many shots as it took to get one sharp. So I think that was about the only shot in that selection. I'm sure it was that I used the tripod. Everything else was just handheld. And with ISO the way it is these days, who cares? I mean,
Yeah, you can have better ISOs. It allows you faster shutters, and these cameras have the internal stabilization. Canon calls it IBIS, maybe Nikon calls it something else, but that also helps. I mean, it's amazing. You can shoot at slow shutter speeds. I mean, I shoot waterfall shots. Now we're talking about waterfalls in the fall. I shoot them at like a second or half a second.
Yeah,
Well, obviously,
handheld.
but I'm handheld. Yeah, it's amazing. So I'm moving the camera around. I mean, without having that tripod. Now, obviously, if you want to go longer than a second and whatnot, sure, you need to have a tripod if you're going for. But most of my shots, I don't like that because I don't want the water to just be a goo. Right? I like a little texture in the water. So
Yeah, me too. Actually, when I'm
third of a second, half a
things,
second, even faster. Sometimes so. Yeah, it's great. So I could just hand hold it and move the polarizer around and just walk around and compose. And having that freedom, it's very rewarding.
It's funny you should say that about the textured water because I'm absolutely in agreement with you. I hate that real sort of candy floss type look where you can see no detail at all, no texture. It's just sort of all fluffy and I
came
it.
across a guy this fall. He was shooting, set up. He goes, look at this, come here. And I said, okay, this is 30 seconds and I've got my, ND filter on. And I'm thinking, okay, I mean, just not my taste because there's nothing. It's just all white blobs of goo, in my opinion. And,
no, I don't like it either. I like the texture because I like it to look like what it is because you're almost seeing it like that with your eyes because you're not seeing it frozen in time. You're seeing I think it's all about capturing the mood, and the mood there is how dynamic that situation is. And if you've got no texture in it at all, it's just it's cotton wool, isn't it? It's nothing.
And it takes the energy from the water. I feel like you want to, when you look at that frame, you want to feel that energy, and the texture helps to define that energy. Bird photographers do it well because they have to, right? So if somebody's photographing a dipper in a stream or a duck or a harlequin duck, they need to have a slow enough shutter to provide that pleasing blur, but fast enough to have the duck or the bird in focus, right? So they'll be, less than a second, right? Maybe it's a third, maybe it's quicker. And they do it right because the water has the motion in it. It's a good combination when you see those shots. In Europe, I know it's those dippers, right? With you have the frozen winter scene, the water is moving, and these are probably from Scandinavia, but they look very, very good because of the texture of the water and the energy.
No, I agree entirely. But talking about ISO, I think that for me again has been another not revelation for 2025, but I've used ISO a lot more, I would say boldly this year than ever before. I think, I mean, primarily because the technology is there to do it, right?
Yeah.
And you start to learn more about the situations where you can get away with it. But well, there are I will shoot very often, and I did it today, funnily enough, before we came on and chatted. I spent an hour just messing around just at the local lake just to get out. I mean, it's overcast and dull today, so perfect high key weather.
Mm,
But of course, being dull, it lacks the light. It might be
yeah.
diffuse, but it's, you lack the light levels that I really like. And if you're shooting high key, that adds to the problem. So you've got to use high ISO to get something. If you want it sharp and you want the shutter speed, you've got no choice.
Yeah.
Um, so quite often I'll be shooting at 10,000 ISO these days if I
Mm,
want to create those sorts of things, and I'm not bothered about it
no.
anymore. And I think that has been another development this year. I think with my photography is not that ISO has ever really bothered me too much before anyway, but I've taken it to an extreme, I think, this year, and thought to myself, you know what? Actually, the result is really pleasing. So why am I worried?
Yeah. And if you're shooting high key, no one can tell anyhow.
No,
And
exactly right.
even if you're not, I like grain. I think there's a bit of when I see grain in an image, it feels more authentic to me versus, ISO 100 and then adding like denoise and noise reduction software on top of it, and it becomes this glazy, smooth, and it looks like plastic. Just like, again, just my opinion, I see people, they'll do these metal frames with this ultra glossy finish. Looks just too fake and artificial to me. Yeah, I like grain. Give me a little bit of grit. It feels more authentic to me when I see that. So I think it's also pleasing. It's not a bad thing when there's some grain in an image. I think it's good.
Authenticity.
Absolutely. I'll only run noise reduction if I think I absolutely need to run it on my images.
Yeah.
It used to
I
be
mean,
I keep running it and I wanted to get everything perfect. And I'm like, this gloss, this isn't what people see. When you see, it's not, to me, it's not pleasing for the most part. In certain situations it is, I guess, but not for me.
I agree. I'll often do it with images, and then you can do it in Lightroom, and then I'll step back and I go, right, okay, now I've done the denoise. Let me step back a stage, because it'll allow you to do that in the menu. What did it look like before?
Yeah.
And then I'll toggle between the two, and I go, right, what do I prefer? Do I prefer a bit of noise, bit of grain, bit of texture to it, or do I want it smoother? And I think that's that's the other thing. Those sorts of, I think if you use those bits of software wisely, they can help in those situations where you need a bit of help. But actually, sometimes it will take that atmosphere away if you're not too careful. It's like
always
putting
play with the
too much
opacity,
makeup.
right? Yeah.
which is not a problem I ever have, but
well,
only at the weekend.
And I always tell people too, and when it comes to post-processing, if you're not so sure about it and you're like, I can't tell, 50%, go down to 50%, half what it is, and you're usually in the money of where that right setting is. Because and sometimes people get too far down a rabbit hole when they post-process, where they make so many changes they can't even tell what they're doing at a certain point. Their eyes aren't even registering some of these, so you don't want to go overboard. And that's especially true, I think, with noise reduction. People try to have their cake and eat it too. They want the whole background to be silky smooth, plasticky gloss, but they want their subject to be so super tack sharp, and it looks like it's been pasted on there like a magnet in a scene. And it just, to me, it's not that. It doesn't feel authentic.
That sort of brings me on quite neatly, a nice little segue into a discussion I think we sort of were going to have before, but I think now's a good time to have it. Talking about authenticity, and sorry, Josh.
Well, that was a layup for this.
Away.
I didn't even intend it, but I think I know where you're going.
Yeah,
and
he knows what I'm going to say.
I put the tee up for that one.
Yeah, is where we're going again. This sort of age-old discussion, really, about technology and its ability to create images that aren't real, and people using it to progress their photography in certain competitions, shall we say. People not having any conscience about openly cheating to try and promote themselves and their, in inverted commas, work. And this is a very small proportion of photographers, I think. But obviously there was, I'm talking about the situation which has occurred recently in Bird Photographer of the Year. And I am not going to go down this rabbit hole too deeply because there are other people that have discussed it and have said everything that needs to be said. But that I do find it very worrying. This whole lack of from certain corners of the community that they just don't care about authenticity anymore, and are quite willing, to do these things to get, I think, acknowledgement for their work, so to speak. It's a difficult subject to articulate properly without, but yeah, it's something that bothers me, and I don't know where that goes. I mean, particularly from a competition standpoint, how do you go about continuing to police that and making sure that doesn't make its way, into the photography space?
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's important. And the one thing that I think you have to be pragmatic and realistic to a certain point and admit that there are a lot of photographers, wildlife photographers, who are out there, and they're extremely competitive, right? We're all competitive to a certain point, right? We're competitive with ourselves and our own expectations, but at the same time, that drive to be competitive and that drive to stand out and to win these contests should not overtake ethical rules and other rules, right, that the contests have set out. And your word is your honor, right? And you're as
It's
good as
almost
your
like a
word.
code, isn't it? People talk
Yeah.
about the code, and the vast majority of the community have this
Yeah.
code. It's not written down. It's not, but it's an unwritten, unsaid thing that you're authentic about things. You're honest about it, how you took things, and said the vast majority of the community has that honesty, but there are those that clearly don't, and that troubles me.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that for 2025 probably has been one of the most worrying things for me, in particular, that situation with that competition, and quite a blatant, quite a blatant cheat, because there's no other word for it, and a lack of transparency from the competition about exactly what happened as well.
Mm. Yeah, I'm not sure we'll ever know exactly what happened. I mean, people have made assumptions to try to figure out exactly what happened, and I think maybe they're spot on in terms of what their assumptions are. But yeah, I think it's important that as wildlife photographers, we need to make sure that we strive to advance our photography. We strive to get noticed when we want to get noticed. But we should play by the rules, right? And we should not try to deceive to get ahead, right? Or try to get one over on other people. I mean, it's important, I think, or if you're showing an image and it's a great image, you could say, this is, it's digital art. This is a composite, and I blended these images together and I included these elements because this was my intention, and then just disclose that.
Yeah.
And if it defies the rules or it goes against the rules of a particular contest, then just don't submit the image. It's as simple as that, really.
Yeah, it's
Doing it
that word. It's that
isn't
word
like a
deception.
bad thing. Yeah. Yeah.
It's that word deception, I think, which is the
Yeah.
key here. If you are deliberately going out there to mislead and deceive people, then I think that's where you cross the line. I mean, I've put up composite images before, and I've said, right, those two elements were there at the time. I just couldn't put them together in one photograph, so it's a composite.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well,
Yeah. I've done it.
that's not deceiving anybody.
Yeah.
Because you're aware of what's happened to generate the end result. But if you're entering a competition which clearly doesn't allow that type of image and you're trying to get away and with it and saying it was in one shot, that's deception.
Yeah.
How I don't understand how people can come at it from that angle and be happy to take away the achievement of somebody else, because that's the worst thing for me, I think, is that by winning and then being having that award withdrawn, there's somebody else out there that hasn't got the reward they deserved for an image, because they didn't bump anybody up
Hmm.
places or whatever. They just turned around and said, well, we're not going to give a prize for that silver award or whatever it was this year. Well, that's stealing from somebody else, I think, and that's the worst of it for me.
Yeah. Yeah, because competitions, for the most part, wildlife photography, all bets are off in terms of what you can do or can't do, right? If you're selling prints or you're creating digital art, you're doing whatever, you want to get following on social media, or you want to advertise something that you created, fine, do whatever you want. But it's when it comes to contests, there's set defined rules that you have to follow the rules in order to be considered for the image. So that there are barriers there, and it's important to respect those barriers.
Yeah, and I think from an ethical point of view as well, it's all incumbent on us to
Mhm.
behave in a proper manner,
Yeah.
in a correct manner, in a manner that doesn't cause any harm, or there are no negative impacts on the things that we photograph. It should all be positive. I mean, we're creating beautiful images of things. If we create beautiful images of wildlife in an ethical way, then we're creating that love for that thing and that desire for other people to want to protect it. So
Yeah.
that's a good thing. And that's
Yeah.
what that's where I will want to be more involved, I think, in the coming years, in terms of promoting that sort of ethical and responsible element, and the honesty of wildlife photography, I think, is where I'm coming from. That's what I want to see for next year, because we have a few plans, do we not, for 26?
We do, and I think it's gonna be really exciting, Rob. I really do.
Yeah. So won't say too much at this point because we're sort of early stages, but um, my history. Let's put it that way. Um, being involved in various things, so we have got some plans for 26. We've also got some sort of trips abroad planned as well for 26.
Yeah.
So, yeah, and one of which might include the UK.
It's been a little while since I've been there, so I'm looking forward to it. I got my
Yeah,
passport renewed, Rob. I'm ready.
you're ready.
Ready.
Good stuff. Yeah, so and there'll be a chance at some point this year. We'll be somewhere that any of the listeners that are in the UK at the time, or you're based in the UK and you're going to said event, come and say hello. But we'll tell you more about that when a few more things have been confirmed. It's a bit too it's a bit too early in the day to be making too many promises, but yeah, lots of exciting things happening. Yeah, and a few more, maybe going beyond 26, a few more other things, that we'll be involved with, and which might include a few trips abroad and that sort of stuff. So yeah, it's all happening. Other than that, what else are you looking forward to in 26? Where do you think your photography is heading?
That's yeah. What you just talked about is one of the things I'm looking forward to, definitely in 26, Rob. Outside of that, just trying to get out and shoot more. I wish that is one regret looking back on 25. I wish I would have shot more. Just the kind of there's a lot of chaotic and turbulent events around the world, but also certainly in the United States, and there's a lot going on. So that I think took up a lot of my mind space, and I didn't get out as much as I should have in 25. So for 26, I want to get out and I want to shoot as much as possible, and hopefully create some really good images along the way. And this, of course, is what you just teased. I'm looking forward to as well. I think it's going to be really exciting think for the folks who are listening, you're going to be very excited when we make these announcements and some of these things get unveiled in the coming months. So I guess I'm looking forward to all of that. In the immediate term, and just going to relax. I'm going to shoot over the next couple of days, and I'm going to probably ring New Year's in watching. What am I going to do? Maybe Stranger Things. I don't know if anybody's been watching that, but that's the big show that's coming to an end on Netflix. It's kind of like this retro 1980s kind of nostalgia, Rob, and it's brought Kate Bush to like being #1, by the way.
All right. Yeah. Good old
Yeah.
Kate. Yeah.
Yeah. Kate's an amazing artist if anybody likes Kate Bush. But anyhow, I think I'll.
She had a house. I don't know whether she still has, but she had a house not far from where I grew up, literally a few miles down the road. So
Is that right? Wow.
Yeah.
I'd love to meet her. She's always been one of my favorites. But anyhow, she's like #1 now in the UK, and who knows? I think maybe in the States with her. They use Running Up That Hill basically in the in the series. But the grand finale is going to be shown around New Year's, so I'll probably check that out, get some shooting in, and just look forward to moving into 26 for sure.
Yeah, I think I'd echo that really. I mean, I didn't, but certainly in the first part of the year, first half of the year, I didn't shoot as much as I really wanted to. That kind of changed as we got into the last quarter. Actually, I've done a lot of shooting over the last sort of 3 months, which I've really enjoyed, and enjoyed time with other people as well. So I think for 26, I'm really looking forward to, the influences that shooting with other people can bring, and the enjoyment that can bring, as well as, being on your own and getting out, with just you and the camera. I think that's the other thing. Those sort of collaborations, I think, is what I'm referring to. I'm looking forward to those, as it's been a long time since I've, had sort of proper collaborative connections with people, working on projects and things together. So I'm really looking forward to that. I think that will change next year for me, completely compared to this year, which, as we said, hasn't been the best, but from a personal point of view. So I'm looking. I don't normally use end of year as a watershed, but I think this year, probably more than any other, I'm going to. It's drawing a line under, the year just gone, and then looking forward to what's coming next year. But as I said, collaborations, a lot more shooting, as you say, looking to go a few different places as well, maybe get abroad a couple of times with a bit of luck next year, which hasn't happened enough. So 26 looks really good, but to keep, I think just keep things simple again in terms of the photography approach is just, keep it simple and just expand upon those, those sort of experiments that I've been undertaking this year, and see how far I can, push the creative limits, if you like, because that's been quite good fun. So I think that's where I'm going with everything in 26.
Well, here's to 26. We're ready, Rob.
Yeah. Exactly. So we're recording this literally a couple of days before New Year. So it's not that far away, and you'll be listening to this on New Year's Day, I think, because that's the aim, to get this out on New Year's Day. So so people have got something to listen to and start their year. So on that note, I hope everybody's had a really good Christmas. And so thanks again for all your lovely coffees which you've been buying us, which is much appreciated. Keep them coming. As far as I think you can never have enough caffeine. So that'd be great if you enjoyed the shows and it's given you some inspiration, or it's perhaps sort of taught you a few things, or you've just enjoyed it from an entertaining point of view. Then if you want to send us a couple of bucks or whatever, then that'd be great. There's a link to buy your coffee in the show notes, so that would be much appreciated. So thank you for everybody again that has done that. That really, we've been actually blown away by the support that you guys.
It's been amazing.
So we're really appreciative. So I hope you've all had an enjoyable break. And here's to a very photographic 2026. Should we put it that way?
Yeah, that sounds good to me.
Yeah,
that sounds good. Wishing everybody a healthy, happy New Year, and get out there with the cameras, enjoy it.
Yeah, and from our point of view, I think we're looking to do a few more podcasts next year. So
yeah,
step it up a bit, And
we got some good guests lined up soon, so that'll be exciting as well. It's always fun to have different guests with different perspectives and different topics. So it'll be fun.
Yeah, I think we need to do more of that. So yeah, we'll get a bit more of that sort of coming your way in 2026. So anyway, Josh, whatever you're doing New Year's Eve, have a good one, and I'll see you in 2026.
Sounds good. Looking forward to it. Thanks, everybody. Happy New Year.
Yeah, Happy New Year, everybody. Cheers. You have been listening to the Wildlife Photography Podcast. If you have enjoyed the content, then please help us to spread the word by sharing a link on your social media platforms, giving us a like, and leaving us a comment. See you all again next time.